All right. Welcome, everybody, to this concluding lecture and last installment in this semester's German Invasion. Our lecture series, Moving the Needle, Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Motivating Ecological Change. We've had 3 dynamic events already, and this is the 4th. I'm very pleased to welcome today to DC Pia Wimmer from Augsburg, from Germany. She is a practitioner who brings a number of different interdisciplinary perspectives to our ongoing discussion about environmental change. She's a freelance journalist. She's also a photographer who has had exhibits in the Munich and Augsburg area. She's most importantly for us, an environmental educator. She's done graduate work, university work in the history of European culture that included some study in Athens, I understand, and a degree program in environmental ethics. And she's currently at work on her dissertation, a very interesting interdisciplinary program in the Augsburg, Munich area in the environmental humanities. She has a interesting interdisciplinary crew of advisors that includes our previous lecturer, Professor Markus Vogt. And she's working on a project she's going to introduce to you in more detail today. So we will start off with a presentation. She has a PowerPoint. Then we will field some questions from the live audience. And we also invite people who are joining us online from around the world to raise your hand. You can submit a question to the chat, or we can call on you and you can join us live. So with that introduction, I'll turn things over to Pia Wimmer. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. Thanks also for everybody for being here, listening to my talk. And furthermore, thanks to everybody who made it possible that I can be here today. So Bill, Marcus first, and also a lot of people in Augsburg who is hosting me these days. I'm very happy to be here, to have the chance to present my project here at CUA in Washington, DC. And today, as Bill already said, I want to give some insights on my dissertation project, which I called Stories of Change, the Potential of Ethical Education for Great Transformation. And what to expect today. Yeah. Okay. Down button doesn't work. No, same happens. Yeah.
Oh, it hung. Okay. You want me to just navigate for you, and you tell me what slides to go? Good.
We can. I mean, you can, if you like, we can stay here for support.
Okay. All right. Good enough.
So otherwise, I'll have a check if it's working right now. So what to expect from today? Our schedule has a small check-in, which is basically has been done by Bill already. Then I want to share some thoughts on where we stand today, what we are facing in the decades to come. Then I want to share some thoughts on environmental education and the concept of ethical literacy. Then comes a more practical insight into my project that I'm conducting in this school year at a German school close to Augsburg, where I live and work. And then I will also draw some possible thoughts about how to measure ethical literacy. Is it possible to measure it? And if yes, how can that be done? And that will lead us hopefully into a fruitful discussion. So, okay, that might be the good. Yes, okay. Okay, let's start with some personal notes, which have been given basically by Bill. So maybe just one thing about the organizational framework I'm writing my PhD in. It's an international doctorate program that is conducted by Augsburg and Munich University, which offers the possibility to interdisciplinary exchange with other PhD students, but also with a huge amount of supervisors from all disciplines. That connected me also with Markus Vogt. What makes me very happy because it's very fruitful also for my own thinking. And yeah, I'm happy to have a scholarship from the German Federal Foundation for Environment. It's called the Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt. That gives me the possibility to really concentrate on my work and also to come here. Yes, and maybe one more point about my freelancing work and also my voluntary work. As Bill already said, I did a lot of different formats on environmental education, freelancing, as well as in non-governmental organizations. And I discovered that it is really difficult to move people, even with shocking news, with really good information, with tips, with presenting alternatives of how to live, how to act. It's very hard to really motivate people. And I started asking, why is that so? And I think that simply knowledge or presenting alternatives is not what people need, but people need skills of how to apply that knowledge. And that leads us directly to environmental and especially ethical education. Some words about our starting point. Where are we? I myself ask myself nearly every day, are we losing the battle? So those charts come from the IPCC report. It's not the latest one, which was published in 20th March, but the last one. But I think it clearly shows the human impact on climate change. And more interesting for me is this one here. It shows that depending on the different degrees of global heating, different percentages of species can be expected to go extinct. And so we really see that it makes a difference if we can limit global warming to 1.5% or not. The thing is that it is mostly agreed upon that we will fail to limit global warming to this 1.5%, and it's likely that we're facing a heating of rather 2.8%. What that sets us somewhere here, and that comes with the rapid loss of biodiversity and maybe for us humans even more important, ecosystem services that provide us with goods we take for granted, like production of oxygen, fresh water, nutrition, food, and all this. Another phenomenon that can be experienced very directly is increasing of extreme weather events like thunderstorms, very heavy rains in very short times. And so scientists suggest that there might be some tipping points we will reach in the next decades where systems might also collapse. And so that leads to the assumption that, at least if we believe those things, and I think we mostly do, that we do not need some moderate change or some moderate adaptation of our lifestyles, but rather a deep change of our economic systems, of the way we live, the way we define and create goods, and we define wealth and success. And that's actually a huge task, because on the one hand, we know that we ought to reduce our emissions and switch from fossil to renewable energies. But the question is, why can't we move? And one thesis I had when doing my environmental education formats is that we're simply lacking a commonly shared vision of first that human culture and habits can be adapted to the named circumstances, and second also how this can be done. And the second point is that so is my experience that most of us also simply don't believe that we can do this, and others maybe just want to maintain their powers and therefore don't foster change. And I think if you look at those two pictures, I don't know, just maybe you could raise your hands if you think of our common futures. Which picture do you see? Maybe people who think those pictures will rise in the common years could raise their hand, or yeah, who favors the left picture?
I think one of our classmates is in transit today, but I think if he were here, he's kind of a techno optimist, so he would go with the picture on the right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it just shows we are also, if we look at movies, for example, we're seeing much more of those pictures than of those of a successful transformation.
How about you, Marcus?
I think the left side is more
Yeah,
probable.
it's extreme examples, and there are also things in between, of course. Just I think we've gotten used to those visions of our future, and this is actually maybe something we can or should change. So the next questions, of course, what to do, what to face, and first is to name the challenge of a deep social, economic, and ecological transition of our capitalist production and consumption systems, which goes in hand with manifold complex and ambiguous ecological, social, and economic implications, and also conflicts, of course. And a special issue, as I already said, that we lack concrete and long-term ideas and visions of how living a good life within planetary boundaries for all of us could look like and could be possible. And yeah, what I encounter is that the technical and content related knowledge doesn't necessarily or rarely foster the will or the motivation for change. And also it is useless in everyday life, in people's everyday lives, when it doesn't come with the ability to reflect and to judge morally, and also to negotiate on what is right and what is wrong in a specific community or context, especially in a constantly changing world. So my personal vision and goal for my project is first the thesis that a transformation of our mostly Western consumerism is needed, and that we need therefore ethical competences to make just decisions and to negotiate of how to distribute goods. And the next idea is to develop an environmental educational concept which focuses on the development of such ethical literacy. I will talk later about that term. So what follows, hopefully, is that awareness rises and strengthens the standing of ethics, focused education, and ethical literacy. And to work on that and evaluate on that, I'm conducting a living lab on education for ethical literacy with the working example of fast fashion. I will explain what is meant by a living lab and what is meant by fast fashion. But first, I want to speak a little bit about this term ethical literacy. And I collected some quotes on why we need to be ethical in environmental education. The first comes from Desmond Tutu. We are called to understand that climate change is a moral challenge. not simply an economic or technological problem. A little bit more detailed by Dean Moore, Kaplan, and Michael Nelson. No amount of factual information will tell us what we ought to do. For that, we need moral convictions, ideas about what it is to act rightly in the world, what it is to be good or just, and the determination to do what is right. Facts and moral convictions together can help us understand what we ought to do, something neither alone can do. And a quote from Markus Vogt, who's among us, to wrap that up, as a tool for making morally good decisions, ethics formulates principles of action and criteria for decision making. And that, in my understanding, leads us directly to education. And I came across this term ethical literacy because I don't know how it is in the English discourse or in the English-speaking discourse. In German, you have quite a lot of different terms which seem to mean more or less the same, but actually describe very specific things. So we have terms like moral judgment, moral decision-making, moral decision finding, same for ethical. And all of those terms mean something very specific, but my experience also from the practical side of environmental education, we are facing such a broad range of skills and knowledge we need to provide people with, that I'm more in favor with that broad term ethical literacy. And I came across it in a publication by Halter Brudi, rethinking the human person, moral landscape and ethical literacy. And this term means or literacy involves ethical literacy, involves a complex set of knowledge, skills, and habits that can be cultivated and enriched through education, such as we have, for example, development of self-confidence and a sense of responsibility, the identification and observation of rights and duties, engaging the individual in learning the knowledge and skills necessary for developing social skills and making informed decisions. On the other hand, the ability to see connection between values, assumption, and ideals, and the ethical consequences of our beliefs, actions, and decisions. Also, ethical literacy includes the ability to identify moral dilemmas and understand moral conflicts. And most of all, I think most important is the capacity to engage effectively in dialogue with others on issues of shared moral concern and negotiate our values and the things we ought to do and find ways of doing that in our communities. Coming to stories, as we need some medium to transport our ideas. We should also speak about the narrative part of ethics, because stories as catalyst for ideas and visions, they can, on the one hand, be counted as all reflections on the communication of ethical insights through the narrative arts. Besides, the intellect, imagination, and feeling are also addressed, so it brings things very close to the recipient and its everyday life experiences. And a quote I really like from Paul Ricoeur, that stories are thought experiments that we carry out in the great laboratory of the imagination, that is a sensory experience of reality, narratives and stories as tools. That means we immerse ourselves in possible futures and possible ideas, and to develop and train that could be a crucial point in developing environmental ethical education. So this is just a chart I draw to bring into order all my different kind of thoughts. It's kind of my research design, or resembles my research design with the environmental education as a method for transformative action and practice, specializing in the focus on ethical literacy as a guiding concept for ethical decision making and acting. And the Living Lab, what I'm going to speak of soon, as an experimental space for a great socio-ecological transformation that leads to a critical emancipatory approach of a transformative educational concept that emphasizes the independent thinking and acting, reflecting and decision-making, and most important, all of that in the face of complex and controversial problems. So if we speak of environmental problems, we don't have easy decisions to make. They're complex, and sometimes we cannot even say what is the best thing to do, and that leaves us somehow alone with our decision. So the next thing is I want to talk a little bit about my project I am doing at a school close to Augsburg, and also explain why such a living lab is a very interesting experimental space for socio-ecological transformation. I hope you can see the headlines. Sorry.
Do you want me to move this?
Yeah, you can change. That's fine. Okay. So, okay, now
Or is it not working?
Okay. Well, thank you. So, what is a living lab? We can imagine living labs as a real existing social context in which researchers conduct interventions in the sense of real experiments and engage in co-production with other actors in real processes of change. So in my case, this real existing social context is the school setting and the classes in there. The real experiment means just that I am there for a whole school year and not just drop by 1 or 2 times. And also the idea to bring that what we are doing now into a repeatable format. And the other actors in this case are quite a lot of people. It's a school administration, it's a class teacher, but it's most important the pupils, the school children, because they shall not only learn from me, I also want to learn from them. And another point which should be considered to in the sense of quality management, if you like, the core features of a living lab should be research orientated. That means some kind of data collection and evaluation. It should have a transformative approach or idea. It follows the principle of sustainable development. We will hear later something about why this term is recently rather criticized or viewed at critically. And the focus lies also on the civic society and not on the academic society. It should be transdisciplinary, have a model character, meaning that it should be something new, nobody has ever done or tried before. Should have a long-term perspective. That means bringing something into life for a longer period of time. Should have a laboratory character, same as research orientated, means it should be measurable and also have a quality control. And it usually comes with an educational mission. Yeah, so those points are rather important. So what I am doing now, the concept and structure of my living lab, the goal is, already pointed it out, is to develop an environmental educational concept which focuses on the development of ethical literacy, and also hopefully I will be able to pin down already some effects which this ethical literacy later will have on consumer behavior, which is difficult, of course, because I would have to accompany the students for a longer range of time, even after the school year, which might not be possible, but okay, I have to make some compromises. I think it's somebody waiting in the room. Wonderful. Yeah. So I'm doing this project with an 8th middle school class. It's a full day school class, meaning that they have regular classes in the first part of the day, and in the afternoon they have additional classes, like, for example, my project. Others have music classes, sports classes. That's not part of a regular syllabus, and so I have this possibility to step in here, and my project is going through the whole school year, which started last September and will end by the end of July this year. And I could gain the Environmental Education Center of Augsburg as a cooperating partner, which is very helpful, because they've got a huge network. They're expanding now also. They built a beautiful new building and are, so they're a big player for environmental education in Augsburg. So, and I chose fast fashion as a working example. I will explain on the next slide why. And the school year, or the concept, is divided into 2 phases, because I want to show, or I hope to be able to show, that the classic environmental education doesn't necessarily need, or doesn't provide the needed skills for change, and that those skills come with the ethical education part. So the first phase is just the information, providing information about production and resources, about social implications, environmental pollution, but also offering workshops about doing do-it-yourself and second-hand clothing. So that would be classical topics in environmental education. Yeah, and the second phase would really focus on working on ethical literacy. So that will rather include things like storytelling and immersion, engaging in role plays and in discussions, speaking about values and concepts, and also learning how to properly argue, and also to build visions and speak and think about narratives. So each phase is followed by an evaluation. The battery is running. Exactly, thank you. So why did I choose fast fashion as a working example? A short question. Please raise your hand if anybody has not come across this term or wants a short explanation. Oh, okay, so it's speaking for itself. I think so. I chose fast fashion because it's become the symbol, I think, for consumerism and profligacy, producing way beyond what we actually need, and and exploiting environment for things that go directly into the garbage. Second point is that the textile industry counts as a really huge factor for environmental destructions through emissions, poisonous substances, but also CO2 emissions and use of water. Fashion, on the other hand, is also a huge factor for identification for, I think, everybody of us, conscious or unconscious, but especially for young people. They express themselves and their stories through fashion. So every jeans is not just a jeans, it's a small story about ourselves. Therefore, juveniles are one of the main target groups for fast fashion, and other than, for example, food, they're directly consuming it. So not through their parents or through somebody else, but they're making their own choices. And also because fast fashion is a global thing, all those global implications for nature, but also mankind can be very nicely displayed through different educational interventions. So manifold options of dealing with the topic. And concerning sustainability education, that would be first pointing out and learning how to deal with. No, I need your.
It's not doing it.
I think the menu bar is interfering somehow. Fine, that's super. So to deal with complexity, controversy, and ambiguity on one hand, but also speak about values and moral norms, and one more and narratives. Thank you. So now I would need one more. Click the next slide. Yes, thank you. The charts in German. So I will go quickly about that. It just shows that 30% of my primary microplastics in the ocean comes from synthetic textile fibers. Textile production uses large amounts of water. A t-shirt, 2,700 liters, the amount of water a person drinks within 2.5 years. Social implications like child labor and poverty, and here environmental degradation through massive pollution. Okay, so what's good and what's not so good? Okay, the question mark should be a sad smiley. What's going good is that I really have a very good cooperation with the administrational side, class teacher, and there's a huge interest in openness. On the other hand, I have to admit, and it shows also how important it is to do research on those things, that the motivation for change and for saving our planet is not as high as I have expected. Comes, I think, with the age they're in and the things they have to deal with. They have come also from very heterogeneous family backgrounds. But all in all, I have to say I'm really happy with this group because, yes, as I said, I learn a lot from them as well. So my task is also to adapt the research question and find suitable methods for data collection that correspond, and that is really important to the cognitive and intellectual and verbal abilities. Okay, just some impressions of how that looks like. In the beginning, we watched a movie, a documentation about fast fashion. Gathered just some associations on that movie. Here's traveling around the world with a jeans where the pupils learn about where things are produced or which steps the production chain contains. The first was a prototype, and then I developed it a little bit more. Here we produced dyeing colors from vegetables. So everything what comes with working with hands is very attractive for the pupils. Here they are, and so whenever they can do something with their hands, they're really engaged. That's the whole of them. And later we did batiks. That was also very well accepted, and so they're proudly showing their new t-shirts, or their old t-shirts rather. So now, as time is running, I want to share some short thoughts about how to measure ethical literacy, because So my goals would be to see if that what I'm doing, the interventions I'm doing, have any effect on ethical literacy, and if those again have effects on consumer habits. Also, if the organization here, if organization and conceptualization are suitable for doing it, and also with other groups. And already said that, so the goal in the end would be to design a transformative educational concept that can be applied easily also through other actors. Of course, such a living lab is not a closed space. I have no influence on what they're doing during other classes in their free time and their families. So I never can be sure if changes come through my intervention or something else. And also, if we have such a complex term like ethical literacy, the question is how can it be measured? So there are different concepts, and also different concepts of what ethical literacy and the ethical competences should be about. And also we're always as individuals in that, between the chairs, you would say, between acting as individual and being part of a system. So yeah, the guiding idea in the end is that students should learn to assess for themselves who bears, under which conditions, responsibility for sustainable consumption, and how to face that responsibility. And all that is highly complex, uncertain, and often ambiguous. So just to wrap that up, I have different kinds of data collection formats, and hopefully we'll be able through that to sketch how the ethical literacy could be developed, or maybe also not. So those data collection, here are some examples how it looks like. It was a poll I made in the beginning to learn about knowledge and assumptions. So here they record their buyings of clothes throughout the school year, also explain what they think of and consider when buying. Here I'd ask just for what's important for you today. At this day it was football, house, money, very material. On other days it was persons. Interesting. So, and just different formats to gather as many informations as I can. And so with a little overtime, we're coming to the discussion. I made some suggestions of what we could speak about, but I'm of course open to any question or impulse.
Very good. Well, first of all, warm thanks for Wimmer. We thank also to Dr. Pack for helping out with the technical work here. Yeah, we can stop sharing. So we are going to open things up first to the class that we have in front of us. What are your questions or comments in response to the discussion questions there for Pia? We want to hear from several of you to kick things off. Sammy.
I just have a comment. I really like that you talk about fast fashion. I know like buying like clothes online is like really popular now. So I never really thought about it as having like an environmental impact. I do it a lot, and like we have an Amazon package at my apartment like every single day, but things like that. So I just thought it was really cool to like hear about and learn more about it. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah, are you all familiar with fast fashion? What are the concerns or the issues that have to do with fast fashion, as far as your knowledge goes? Nicole?
Well, there's the ethical concerns of who's making it,
Uh-huh.
the treatment of the workers.
Uh-huh. Okay, it was a pretty stunning statistic that as much water as somebody would drink in 2.5 years goes into the production of one T-shirt. That was one of the graphics up there. Justine?
I was just gonna say that most of America's fast fashion, I think, is imported, so there's the extra energy costs of
Yeah.
importing large amounts of
Yeah.
textiles.
Yeah, totally right. And due to time concerns, I couldn't speak about that, but maybe you remember the one picture with the map. And there was this first prototype and the second one, and it came really clear that the first parts of that production chain with the really cheap work, the worst working conditions, the lowest wages, they're all conducted in the let's say in Southeast Asia, and the attractive jobs in the chain are all located in the Northwest, like in the US and Europe. So that became visible only through that map. I wasn't aware of that before, and that
Now,
really-
Pia, how much were you paying the workers in your classroom who were making those clothes? Was that child labor that you had there in your lab? I'm just kidding. No, seriously, Justine, I think you had another question before.
I did, yeah. Why did you choose to do this work with middle schoolers in particular?
Thank you. That's a very good question. You have to say that the middle school in Germany is the secondary school with the how to say it in positive words, with the lowest degree you can make. Today you have the options to go further after that, but it's not very well considered. And a lot of offers for environmental education go towards high schools, and this type of school is often forgotten because it has this heterogeneous structures with a lot of migrational background coming with language barriers, and also you have to always deal with behavioral things that might be a little bit more hard to combine than in other school forms, and that's why environmental educational programs usually go to the higher schools, and I just thought that's unfair. So because this is also a very large group of people who grow up, and I thought it's unfair to just not see them and not let them speak.
All right, I want a couple more questions. I want you to show off your ethical literacy by posing some probing questions to our speaker today. Marianne.
Have you been like surprised by any findings while working with the middle school children?
Yes, indeed, I have been, and especially if it comes to that ethical thinking. How can I explain that? You really notice that on the one hand, they're just not used to it. And if you find the right buttons that you have to press in their minds, that suddenly opens up like a flower which is long closed, and then suddenly, wow, it's a beautiful rose. And so that on the one hand impressed me, and also it made me sad because the assumption is it's not there, but it is there. You just have to uncover it, and that really touched me, because I thought that's even more unfair, because they can do that, and they did manage to dig really deep, but you have to give space and time to that, and also have a good community with so that's the good thing, is they're really trusting each other, and they have a good community. Maybe in another school class it wouldn't even be possible, but that's really surprised and touched.
Can you describe one sort of aha experience that that a student or group of students had in your lab?
Yeah, for example, also when we did the thing with the map with the genes, they were very also, like me, surprised and touched by the fact that also the lowest paid jobs are usually done by women. And so they, I mean, if you, how can I say, if you let them, they really, they find things and they stumble upon things. And the funny thing is, in one class, I wanted to talk about, I don't even remember what it was, but the discussion completely turned to a 1.5 hour discussion about eating meat. And it was so intense. We didn't write anything down the blackboard. It was just question and answering. But if it's like this, that it follows that, and that was great. That was really great. Without any preparation, they just came up with that, and yeah, that was really good.
Yes.
I really enjoyed your discussion of narrative, and I thought that it was interesting because like you started the presentation off by like asking us with the photos, like kind of like what is our narrative, and like we're kind of like as a population, I think kind of confused or haven't really developed a narrative as it relates to climate change. And so I think, especially with your research sample of children, because I feel like children primarily learn ethics and those kind of things from the stories they're told. They're like very attached to stories. So I guess like, do you think that narratives and education will play a critical role in developing like a new generation of the next generation of people to kind of like curb climate change or just ecological crises in general?
The short answer is yes. And the thing is how to form an educational concept, how to enable people, and especially young people, to tell stories again, because if you look at people, everybody's immersed into a smartphone or computer screen, but or just consuming stuff, but learning how to just speak about our environment, our futures, that will be a crucial skill. Because I mean, simple example, if you want to build a house, for example, you're married, you want to build a house with your partner, you have to speak to each other about how this house shall look like. And then you're making a plan, you find a place where you can build it, you think about what shall be around this house, and you make a plan and you build this house, and in the end, more or less, the house you had in your imagination will be there. Maybe look a little bit different, smaller, bigger. So that's is for me a simple example that this works. We have to speak about what kind of humans we want to be, and in what kind of world we want to live, and especially the young generation is the addressee of that, I think. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, let's broaden things out to our other guests here, and also people online. If you'd like to put something in the chat or check in, I'll turn to you in a moment. Marcus, you're on the committee for this project. Do you, as a supervisor, have any comments or questions right now?
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. I had one idea. Perhaps it could be important to include also a political dimension of change, because sometimes we have, especially in the field of consumption ethics, a too individualistic approach, and a deep change needs also a change of the structure and the rules and the responsible persons. And I remember to the project Felix Finkenbeiner, who is quite famous, and he is with 9 years. He had a speech talk in the Full Assembly of United Nations. And he had the project for education for young people with telling stories, and especially he encouraged them to go to responsible people in their city or their village, to the teacher, to the major, to the chief of a company, and to ask them questions. And that is very successful. and he makes something like a rhetoric education for them, how to ask provoking question, how to manage it also with publicity. Genres where is written about, and the young people have a special chance for communication in public because they are the face of the future.
Interesting.
It could be interesting for you to integrate that dimension. So it's not only the bad conscious and the individual change,
of course,
they are also active to change society.
Yeah. Also, what you just said is very important, and at least from my side, absolutely recognized. And yes, this is a big challenge to not only concentrate on these individual processes, because individual change doesn't do anything without systemic change. But it's really hard to, how can I say? Bring that into the classroom, but the example with Felix Finkbeiner will be a very nice practical example, and I already have ideas of how to include that.
I had a question that's related to that point, though, because I wonder how much the German educational system is attuned in a way that encourages what you described as this kind of approach, namely an emancipatory, a transformative pedagogy. Because traditional schools are about teaching students facts, information, learning, giving them perhaps skills they're not about activating students to become activists themselves. And is that at all a difficulty in Germany, convincing schools that they should be emancipatory institutions, transformative institutes that are trying to transform society, not just in a narrower traditional sense, educational?
On the one hand, I would say that a lot of schools, educational institutions, of course, find it attractive to claim that they are transformative and whatever, but the general school system comes down to measurability, school grades. So you need a school system that makes it possible to just exactly measure how did anybody advance and to compare students one to each other. Funnily, I don't know if the PISA study is known.
Not so much.
In the US, so it turned out German students don't do very good, even on the measurable accounts. But there are school forms which open that up, for example, Montessori schools. Another form is Waldorf Schule, who have completely different
alternative models, relatively small models. And when you look at somebody like Greta Thunberg, she's somebody who has had a global impact on this generation of schools, but not so much by going to school as by not going to school, by avoiding school. And I don't know if the schools would want to take credit for her transforming society. She certainly didn't learn in school. I think she self-educated herself about the issues.
Perhaps it's helpful to see also the big movement about climate change schools. That's really a group from schools. They do not only proclaim that change is important, but they encourage the pupils to be active. Firstly, to shape the school life more ecological, and then beginning with the school, also a little bit to society. And that are quite controversial debates because they started following Greta Thunberg to not to go to school, and there were conflicts, and then the teachers and the school managers discussed and said they would like to encourage the pupils to be active, but together with the teachers, with knowledge in the background on their specific level, and with speaking with public and society. And that could be interesting also for you to have a look to the movement of climate schools.
Thank you.
Dr. Pack, any?
Yeah, this was very helpful, so thank you for this presentation. I really love the map that you showed about where the textiles traveled. And I'm kind of curious, so when I was in middle school and I was also learning from our religious tradition, we talked a lot about the common good. And we talked about solidarity and subsidiarity. How do we make things happen on a positive way, locally and globally? And then when I went into the International Baccalaureate program, we had a global perspective in terms of learning these things. So in this middle school system and maybe in the public school system, how is the common good understood? Do they talk about that? And then do they learn about maybe longer term kind of thinking on impact? Or I'm just kind of curious about the difference maybe.
To be honest, I don't know if those things are on the official syllabus. I would guess that it comes down to the teachers if they address such things. I can imagine that in religion or ethics classes, that Marcus, maybe you know more about that this is a topic, but I wouldn't think that it's very broadly discussed, not to an extent that gives people kind of real idea or even identification with such concepts.
Do they ever go back to the ancients, like maybe even like Aristotle, or talking about eudaimonia, or
In the higher school, like the gymnasium, which should be the high school here, I think they do, depending a little bit also on which classes the school offers, or which educational branch the pupils take, language orientated, mathematics orientated, or philosophy orientated. But I would say yes.
And just one last question.
Sure.
Did the topic of happiness ever come up? How human beings search for happiness in the marketplace?
Not yet, but as I said, so I'm just now turning to the ethical part of my educational project, and of course that will be, I mean, it's in the end it comes down to happiness. If people are being able to find their happiness and without taking other people's chances of finding their happiness.
Good. Well, let me turn to our internet audience that's checking in from around the world. If any of you would like to pose a question or make a comment, you can show yourselves, activate your video, and raise your hand or unmute yourself.
May I join with my positive emotions and appreciation to your report? I'm Mamuka Dolidze from Tbilisi State University, and I really enjoy your report and seeing the hidden context of your speech. That means to moral literacy means, at least means, eventually means keeping the balance between nature and artificial environment, because we cannot come back to our primordial state of primitive happiness in the nature. So we need artificial environment for development of our spiritual abilities and our mind. But in this development, we should be careful to make the balance between them. And in this case, we need the morality, strong basis of morality. That is a hidden context which I see in your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that comment.
Let me push you a little bit on this question of ethical literacy that you've fixed on as an important term. If we're trying to build ethical literacy, then we have to give some attention to what obstacles there might be, or what factors promote ethical illiteracy in a society. So I know you're still in the middle of your study and you're still gathering experiences, but what are your impressions at this point about what might hinder or obstruct ethical literacy in young people, in old people?
I think there could be named a lot of things now, maybe something that is close to the pupils. I personally think that it's not often and broadly enough and not early enough addressed. I personally think it should become something that is already part of kindergarten education, or as you can call it education. The other thing is, of course, that the market system has got a huge machinery running on making us consume, about buying stuff. Maybe you remember the picture with the heap of clothes. Those clothes have been dumped in the Atacama Desert, I think it was, in Chile. Most of them carrying still the price etiquettes. They can be bought for, I don't know, $1, $2, $3 in shops in the rich countries, where anybody could buy a t-shirt also for 20 euros. But it's produced so cheap that I don't know why even. I just don't understand the system. And the thing is that in the other parts of the world, humans suffer from that, but it's kept out of our view. It's not addressed often and openly enough. And then again, also the consumerist society finds excuses like, well, the child needs to support his family. It has to work. We won't, if we take the job, it cannot support its family. And there, that's what I said. It's complex, it's ambiguous, and we have to also, or sometimes it's also uncomfortable to engage into this thinking and discussion. And I think that's why people, just don't do it. And then again, because of the stories, we're lacking ideas of how it could be different, that we do not lose something if we reduce our consumption, but that we gain. We have more money for real important things. We have more time. We can build on our relationships, on friendships. We can really find ourselves and experience ourselves, and not just collect stuff.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Can I ask a question here from the internet?
Okay.
Julie Garradine.
Yes.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning of your presentation. It looked very interesting, but I'm curious about the way you're studying ethical literacy, and in particular, if you consider things like John Dewey's moral traits, wide sympathy, balance of interests, keen sensitiveness, persistence in the face of the disagreeable, are those things that you would, kind of look at as the foundation for becoming ethically literate?
I'm looking into those things. What I'm doing right now at this phase of my dissertation is rather finding out how I can address this specific peer group or target group I'm working in. That means how can ethical education, in means of ethical literacy education, be part of environmental education. So to some extent, yes, I'm looking into that. Just at this point, I cannot give a broader or deeper report on it.
That raises an additional interesting question to me anyway. You've only been in the US. This is your first trip.
Yeah.
You've been here a couple weeks, but at the same time, I'm sure you have a very well-developed picture of the US, of American culture, and probably from stories that you've encountered. I wonder what your impressions are about differences between education in Germany and education in the US, or just even more broadly, the different kind of cultural attitudes there toward nature,
Yeah.
toward the environment, toward environmentalism. And if you have any thoughts about how that might play out in the kind of project that you're doing, working in environmental education.
Yeah. One major difference, which yeah, might be rather obvious, but maybe also not, are the dimension of Northern American availability of resources and the German space nature still has, because if you look again at the map, the United States has such a huge dimension, and there's the how can I express that? It's something completely unknown for me, that it's just that much space, and even if you build huge buildings and very broad roads, and if you have really cars double size of the average German, to exaggerate a bit, there's still so much place left. And in Germany, we have the other thing around. We have very limited space. We have small cities that are, some are several hundred or maybe a few, even 1,000 years old, have their roots in Middle Ages. So the structures are very different. And maybe in Germany, we see limits and borders everywhere, because if I stand here, there's a house, there's a car, it's all very narrow, but here you have those wide spaces. And I think that's something that it makes something with with being in a place.
Well, again, if our classmate who's from Arizona were here, he's described how being out in the great open spaces there next to a national park shapes his sense of the environment. Back to Julie's question, she was pointing to John Dewey as an important American educator. He's somebody who was trained, shaped to some extent by German scholars, and I think some of the philosophical work that Dewey and other people did in the field of pragmatism is having a return influence in some ways in Germany. And since we have Ivo on the call today, and he spoke in this series and has engaged a little bit that philosophical tradition, I wonder, Ivo, if you have any comments, or if you see any points of connection between your talk that you gave on epistemology early in this series, or more broadly your own research, and this kind of very practical educational project in Germany.
Hi, I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Well, the connections are there quite obviously in this whole question of how transformation is possible and what the preconditions are for transformation to take place, not only on an individual level, but on a more broader societal level. Also, quite obviously, the approach is quite different in going into those living laboratory contexts. So I guess the most direct point of interaction here might be what you pointed to right to the end of your talk, with the question of how to measure whether what comes out of an experiment like this can be considered something like ethical literacy. What is ethical literacy as opposed to ethical decision making in a more general sense? What's the connection between ethical literacy and other concepts like culture-nature literacy in a more broader sense, and all those? And also, what part of decision-making, right down to everyday life decisions, can be brought back to a learning context like this, and how to distinguish that from other sources. So I guess this is also where just this form of practical approach to those questions isn't what I'm engaged in mostly. So this is where I just don't know how to engage in those questions. I don't know whether that helps to answer your question, Bill.
Mhm. Any thoughts? I know you didn't hear his talk before, but he's also interested
Yeah,
in transformation.
everything you just said about the measurability and which concept actually to measure, that's one of the difficulties I'm facing, to simply be honest. And I discussed with my other supervisors that we would have a rather broad approach. So for example, I'm the most important tool for data collection is the dilemma discussions. Usually talk on an ethical or moral subject with different perspectives, different pieces of information. This is a method used quite often for those approaches. But I have also, maybe if you remember it, I make small polls. I look into their feelings, their thoughts, also their consuming. So I hope that I can bring all this together and yeah, say something about if in the end an educational concept like the one I'm developing will enable young people to just go into their futures with with a positive attitude and with the will and with the motivation to design their futures in democratic processes. So that's the actual thing I hope I will be able to do.
Mhm. So you're trying to empower these
Yeah,
students
yeah.
in a certain way.
That's the idea.
I did have one, just a very practical logistical question for you. Is it difficult to get permission to, in a sense, experiment on human subjects like this?
Yes and no. In my
Or to
case,
show their pictures in our classroom? Yeah. Mhm.
so because it's just one school class and not two or more, and it's in this middle school and not on a gymnasium or preschool, I had just I wrote an email to an office which is in charge of, and they said, yeah, sounds fine, go ahead.
Mhm.
This is rather the exception.
Do you have permission from their parents, or do they sign something?
Yeah, so I discussed with the how's the English term, with the person of the university who's in charge of data
Mhm.
stuff. What do I have to do in order to make it possible to show some pictures? And I wrote some pages as information for the parents and let them sign that. I mean, the thing is, most of them won't have read that, won't have understood that, because the legal terms I have to use. It's yeah. So
I'm sure that they have protections in place for those students. Last comment. We're just about at time and need to be wrapping things up. But Marcus mentioned a little while ago the climate action school that's taken root in Germany over the last 5 years. We're talking here about a day or a week, really. When is it? In June, I think, where it's a kind of nationally organized event where high schools, colleges, other types of institutes are all invited to organize teach-ins or other sorts of events that highlight climate change and the problems and issues that it poses. So it's a really remarkable coordinated event that takes place at a lot of different places in the overarching educational system. And it's a kind of thing that we don't really have here on that kind of scale here, I think. But it's certainly something that we, or that you could aspire to, because you are future leaders in this field who are going to be going out and doing some of the creative organizing and envisioning that's required to address these problems. I wonder for you if you have a vision of taking your pilot project and turning it into something larger? Is there a curriculum that you have in mind that could be distributed more broadly, or are you developing specific kinds of, what is your vision about where this might go?
Yeah, so the basic vision is just that ethical education becomes considered as important part of any environmental education. And in specific, I hope to be able to establish that, especially in this now new built environmental education center, because I already work with them, and I hope that this will be my my phone, my speaker, so to say. Yeah. And maybe I also had one thought that I want to share, that education does not only happen in schools and formal environments, but education is also what we do when we speak about things, when we carry out into the public, into our families and friends, what we have learned, what we have discussed about, our ideas. So not only to think of education as something with a curriculum, but education as lifelong learning also, and something which is there for, should be there for, include everybody.
All right, well, let's thank the event one more time. I hope you'll be sending some lifelong learners forth from this classroom and
great.
back to their respective affairs in our global audience. Thank you all for joining us. This concludes our series. Those who are here on site are welcome to come grab a little bit of refreshment. We do have a little bit of pizza again. And please keep an eye out for further events sponsored by the McLean Center. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Very much.
Adios.